Ask is because of the SNP's gender recognition bill. It looks like the UK and Scottish governments are headed for a Supreme Court showdown. This is a historic first where the UK government will invoke Section 35 of the Scotland Act, which would stop the controversial Scottish law taking effect. Nicola of the North has claimed the decision is an outrage and has claimed the government are using trans people as a political weapon. I believe psychologists call that projection. Anyway, joining me now for both sides of this debate is the teacher, Debbie Hayton, and the human rights campaigner, Peter Tatchell. Good evening, both of you. Debbie, could I start with you? What do you make of this?
Well, I think Nicola Sturgeon's been using trans people as a political weapon, if I'm honest. We were living quite happily in society 4 or 5 years ago, but then this row has appeared and we've been dragged into a political debate which we never wanted to be. Our rights have been hauled through the media. What we're seeing here is the Scottish government, the Scottish Parliament, apparently has moved beyond its level of competence, and the UK government has rightly said, no, you're not allowed to do that because it interferes with reserve matters, which are purely the business of the UK government.
Interestingly, that trans people perhaps would like to be less visible, not more visible, to get on with their lives.
Well, yes, that was always the idea of transition. You transitioned in order to be able to get on with your life in peace, not to be part of an active political debate, which was seemingly to actually undermine some of the basic foundations of society, what it means to be a man or a woman.
Peter, good evening. What do you make of this?
Well, I think this decision by the Scottish Secretary and the Westminster Government is a direct attack on trans people and, most significantly, or equally significantly, Scottish democracy. The government is saying to the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people, you have elected MSPs, you've elected a Parliament, you've passed this bill with a huge majority, 86 to 39. The legislation has been through years of public consultation and debate, yet now the British Parliament, the British government, is going to usurp a devolved matter which was agreed with the devolution settlement 2 decades ago. That tears up devolution, and I think it's going to fuel further demands for independence, because the Scottish people rightly say, we elected our Parliament, the Parliament voted, and now Westminster is vetoing. And it's absolutely wrong. This is not a matter on which the Westminster Parliament was ever supposed to have the right of veto. The Scottish Secretary says that the legislation is in violation of the Equality Act. It is not. And the fact that he's not spelled out how it's in a violation of the Equality Act, I think shows he's just pacing for time and using this as an excuse to try and justify a very bad decision which tears up the devolution agreement of the 1990s.
Well, Peter, that's a very technical takedown of the government's position, but surely it's something much simpler than that. It's the fact that a man can identify as a woman without diagnosis of body dysmorphia or anything anymore and live just for 3 months. Surely we're talking about something very simple here, not as complicated as, we're not going to break up the United Kingdom over transgender people, are we?
Well, I think the Scottish people will be rightly very angry that their democratically elected parliament is being usurped by Westminster on an issue where there are supposed to be no usurpation powers. Now, the issue of trans people is very simple. There are differences between a biological woman and a trans woman. They're different, they're not the same, but both deserve equal rights and equal respect. And this legislation is simply going to give trans people the right to change their gender through a self-ID via a statutory declaration that is an instrument of law that is legally binding. So anybody who whimsically takes out a self-ID trans identity and then violates it will be open to prosecution. This system works well in other countries. There's no reason why it can't work in the UK as well.
Debbie, I was reading through these trans legislation in countries across the world, and I was actually very moved by the Argentinian story of this very small minority of people who 9% of them have jobs, a lot work in sex work. Should we not be doing more to protect trans people?
Well, you've brought in the case in Argentina. We've got different issues going on here, Lawrence. Trans people in the UK were a different demographic to prostitutes in South America. It's a very risky environment to be in. Now, whether it's because they're trans or they work in the sex industry, who knows? But what we're looking at here is something happening in the United Kingdom, where trans people are not oppressed. We're not specifically harassed as some victimised community. We're not. We hold down jobs. We're well protected by the law. What's happened in Scotland, though, is that the Scottish Government has actually moved on something which does affect the Equality Act. Alistair Jack is right. If Peter says that trans women and biological women are different, and that is true, but the Gender Recognition Act itself, if I chose to get a GRC and actually use that act, I'd be legally indistinguishable from a woman. All my paperwork, including my birth certificate, would say female. And what that means is that service providers are unable to distinguish between me and a woman. And if I've been born in Scotland and I apply for a Scottish GRC, the fact I live in England doesn't matter. So it is affecting issues across the United Kingdom, is this. And because of that, it's not a matter which is just affecting Scotland. And that is the reason why it's right for Alistair Jack to invoke this. Now, Peter also talks about the effect on the union. But self-ID, polling in Scotland says that self-ID is unpopular. So appealing to the people of Scotland may be very interesting. It could break the union, yes, but it could also make the union if the people of Scotland see that there are two governments here. They have two governments, one of which knows the difference between a man and a woman and will protect women's rights, and the other one which doesn't seem to know.
Peter, surely that's a very good point, to be able to say that this, you're taking someone, you're completely affecting their entire history. You're rewriting their history. Is that not I mentioned the Argentinian case, but you look at Spain, and Spain is looking to anyone who's over 14. So are we looking thin end of the wedge, thick end of the wedge? Debbie's got a point, surely, here.
Well, Debbie is wrong when she says that trans people are not oppressed. All the research shows that trans people have much higher rates of prejudice, discrimination, hate crime, domestic abuse and sexual assault compared to the general population. And that means that we rightly should seek to protect them and to do everything in our power to ease their lives. The idea that simply by amending
up the union.
Well, no one wants to break up the union, as far as I know, on this issue, but that's what might happen. So we have to be very careful about unintended consequences. And I think that when it comes to trans people, they're simply asking for dignity and respect. Now, Debbie reflects one point of view, but she does not reflect the majority trans view in this country.
But how can you say that you speak for the majority of trans people in this country, Peter?
Well, I don't. I'm merely reflecting the research and the evidence given by trans organisations and individuals to public consultations here in England and Wales and in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. It's very clear the majority of trans people want this gender reform bill to go ahead in Scotland. They want it extended to Northern Ireland, England and Wales. They are responsible, respectable citizens who deserve our support.
I don't think anyone would question that trans people deserve our respect and dignity and support. I think I would like to offer the last word to Debbie. Debbie.
Well, trans people don't necessarily want this legislation to go through. Gender recognition is a very remarkable piece of legislation. It allows us to change our birth certificate to pretend that we're the other sex. And if you open that up to anybody who wants to do that for whatever reason, then you're going to attract the people who want to imitate the other sex and want to circumvent the safeguarding that the other sex has in place. And when you do that, the whole system risks being brought into disrepute. We are trans people. Other activists can disappear onto some other campaign, but we'll be left here with a system which is possibly in disrepute.
Much, and thank you very